Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. We're going to have a few speakers that have PowerPoint.
Yep, we'll make them co-hosts once they join.
Okay, great. I see Johnny's on the call. Brian's on the call. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Carol.
Hi there. Good morning.
Morning.
How's everybody doing? Are you all set?
Think so.
We
Yeah,
have
Coffee ready?
we have 86 people that have signed up. That's a
Okay.
great
Alright.
turnout.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. They were still signing up this morning. When I got up at 6, people were signing up then.
Congratulations. That's great. Wonderful
It
turnout.
should be fun. Well, they want to hear from you. No pressure.
No.
Carol and Brian, I'm just gonna make you co-host too, just in case.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Jordan, are you going to be able to mute everybody? I'll ask people to mute themselves, but can you do a mass mute?
Yep. So
Okay.
actually, as soon as they join, they're automatically muted.
Okay, great.
But yeah, if I see anyone unmuted, I'll mute them.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Moses. You're
I was muted, sorry.
Nice to
Good morning.
see you. Good morning.
Morning, Moses.
Good morning, how are you?
Good.
Got your little note, read it.
Good. Yeah, nothing out of what we've already talked about. Just
No?
recap. Just a recap.
Sure.
Jordan,
No, I think that's nice.
you have our opening and closing slides, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Moses, have you met Nick?
I have not. Hi, Nick.
Nick?
Hey,
Nick,
Moses.
I recognize.
Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Nick, do you have PowerPoint?
I do, just 4 slides.
Okay.
I don't have any.
I mean,
Nick,
they're
do you wanna
real
test-
introductory, so.
Nick, do you want to test quickly? Just share your screen just to make sure it works properly.
Sure. You guys see that?
Yep. Perfect.
Perfect.
Looks good to me. If I don't get a chance to say it, Nick, very best of luck.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think you're at a
Same here.
different point in this than I am, but that's great.
That's right. Yep. You're where I hope to be.
I'm just going to wait for Johnny and Justin, and then we'll kind of just review the agenda one more time.
Carol, just a little, hopefully this is not a real warning. I don't know about my internet. Every once in a while, it's a little goofy.
Okay.
Are you hearing me okay? I'm getting a signal about instability, but
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
okay. I can't always hear you perfectly. There's
Okay.
that kind of Martian interference every once in a while, but we'll work through it.
Okay. We'll just carry on.
Okay.
If it gets really bad, it might be best to turn off your video and just use audio. Sometimes
Right.
it can help with that.
Yeah, so believe me, in my current job, I do this all the time.
Yeah.
We try that experiment regularly. I have to say sometimes it works for others on the call better than for me. I don't know whether it's something about my area or something.
And then in your Zoom link, do you have the phone number for this call too, in case you need it?
No, I do not believe I do. Do I? Not the most recent one, anyway.
I can grab it if need be.
Morning, Johnny.
Morning.
Morning, Johnny. Does everyone see this phone number? 929-436-2866.
36. And was there a conference number or?
Amy or Jordan is,
That's the direct dial line for this meeting.
okay,
Okay.
can you show us that one more time, please? Or is it in the chat?
In the chat.
It's in the chat, okay. I'll read it out loud again. Wait, hang on.
If anybody new has come on, they probably don't see it. So I'll share it out one more time anyway.
And if it asks for a meeting ID, I have that as well. So I'm just going to throw that in there.
Okay,
And there is no conference number, or you just call that number and you get in on the meeting, is that right?
Yes. And then it asks for,
Yes.
if it asks for the meeting ID, there's the meeting ID.
All right, I knew I needed something.
does everyone see that? 912.
This is for what?
In case people need the phone number to get in, or if their audio or visual is not working and they need to call in, just in case.
So
Johnny, where are you?
I'm in Cranston right now.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't find a great location to be without a mask, so I'm
Oh.
outside.
Okay, okay. Hi, Justin. You're on mute.
Hello.
Okay, great. We have everybody here.
Hello, Moses. Good to see you. Been a
Good
while.
to see you again, Justin. It's been a while.
Mhm.
I do remember our first meeting.
I do too. Yes.
All right, well, thank you all. Here's Peter Snyder. Good morning, Peter.
Hello, Peter.
Sorry,
Been a
I
while
don't know if
too. How are you?
I'm very good. I missed a whole lot of that. Justin, I'm having a lot of trouble with my internet.
Oh, I'm very sorry, Moses. I was
apologize.
just saying good morning to Peter Snyder, who I have not seen in a couple of years either. So
Oh, all right.
I think you're on mute, Peter.
Good morning, everybody, and good to see you, Justin. It's been a while.
yes, yes.
I hope you're well.
Thank you, and you too.
Okay, great. I'm really pleased to have all of you here. I'm just going to do just a few logistics before we get started. So thank you all for being here this morning. Very exciting day. We have about 86 people registered for this event, so we had a great turnout. And welcome, Bangsa. You're on mute, but welcome. Nice to see you. And I hope you're all excited about this morning's event. It should be a lot of fun, and people have been very interested in learning more about your work in Rhode Island. And there will be a lot of interest in what you're doing and your recommendations about how other people might follow the paths that you followed. So we're going to keep the chat function on during the event, so we'll get questions that we can direct to you. As you know, Brian will be your moderator this morning. We'll start with welcoming remarks from Peter Snyder on behalf of Rhode Island INBRE. And then I will just then introduce Brian. Brian will take over from there and lead the panel discussion, which is about an hour. And we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. We have more time if we need it. And then Bob Coughlin, the CEO of MassBio, will be coming on to close the event. And Bob will be talking about life sciences in Massachusetts, since that's a leading life sciences cluster. But he'll also be talking about his own personal experience because his son has cystic fibrosis. And so the latest development at Vertex is very important to him, and very significant in his son's life and in his family's life. So you'll get a little personal story from Bob, as well as a broad overview of life sciences in the region. So we took the Rhode Island perspective, which is really important, which we really want to emphasize. We're featuring Rhode Island companies. And this event is sponsored by Driven, which Bunks Up is representing URI, and Ed Harrett from Brown is also representing Driven. So those two organizations are sponsoring this event, and we're very grateful and appreciative for that. So that's kind of where we are. Any questions before we get started?
No?
Okay, you're all looking great. If you have any internet problems, in the chat function is a phone number to call in with a meeting ID. If for some reason you can't access that, you can let me know. I have it written down as well. In case you have internet instability, Amy has recommended that you turn off your camera until you can get back on. So that's another way to manage that.
Okay, Carol, I do not see that phone number in chat.
Okay, I will read it to you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep.
929
Yeah.
436
Yep.
2866.
Yeah.
And the meeting ID is, in case you need it, 912-0168-6876.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Hi, Toonie. Nice to see you. Do you want to welcome everyone?
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I'm the Executive Director of District Hall and Venture Cafe Providence, and very excited to work with Rhode Island Bio whenever we get a chance. And looking forward to hearing today's program. It's a packed 3 hours, right? Right, Carol?
It is. And we actually have 86 people that have registered. So we're very excited about that.
Fantastic. Thank you for all you're doing to grow the economy and save lives. I guess that's all I have to say, Carol. Do we have anything coming up?
We do. We're going to announce the Rhode Island Innovator Series at the end of this session. And we're taking the companies that are part of this session and expanding and having individual showcases of each of those companies.
Fantastic. So I will be jumping off at 11:30. We have to kick off our Venture Cafe Thursday gathering, and I host the first session. So if any of you are interested in esports and feel like staying online, we have 11:30 to 3 o'clock today, our Thursday programming, and it's all about esports. So it might be a nice diversion.
Esports?
Mm-hmm.
What are esports?
To be honest, it's not my area of expertise. So I'm actually, this is in partnership with Suli Ko from Commerce RI.
Yes.
And honestly, esports is kind of a large umbrella, and there's a lot that falls under that. Everything, from the competition gaming they do. It used to be like in stadiums. So you can be considered, part of esports if you follow. It's kind of like picture, sports that we follow in person, like traditional historical sports, the online version of that. So, and then there's all kinds of esports technology that is utilized in different sectors now too. So, they take gamification and I guess I do know more than I think I know. They take gamification and utilize it in medtech sometimes, and all kinds of other sectors. So should be an interesting 3.5 hours.
That's fascinating.
Running a large university research operation by remote is an e-sport.
I thought that was a blood sport.
Both.
That too.
I just want to check with Jordan that we're recording the session.
We are.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll wait a couple of minutes. We have 20 people on right now.
Fantastic. And so far, where is everyone from?
So I'm in Rehoboth, Mass right now.
Tiverton, Rhode Island.
Are the majority of people on today from Rhode Island, Carol?
They're all Rhode Island because that's what we're focused on.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there were some featured guests that were.
Well, some of
well,
us
Bob
do
Coughlin will
business
be
in Rhode
from
Island.
Mass.
Some of us aren't there.
Uh-huh.
Rhode
Hi,
Island-
Michael.
Morning.
Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm gonna duck out for 20 minutes at about 9:30, but I'll come back, I promise.
Excellent. Thank you.
It really feels like the needle is moving, doesn't it?
It does.
Hi, Michael. It's nice to see you.
Patrice is here.
Hi, Patrice.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Morning, Patrice.
How's everybody?
Well,
All good.
morning.
Moses, Johnny, Nick, thank you for all participating.
I don't know.
Happy to
Brian,
be here.
Thank you for moderating.
My pleasure.
Just going to wait a couple of more minutes for a few more people to sign on.
How are you this morning, Brian? Are you ready to moderate?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. I didn't get my morning workout in, but I'll bring the energy, I promise.
Are you at 225 Dyer right now?
I'm at Nemec.
Nemec, oh, that, yeah.
Yeah.
Carol, what's that image on the back on this flyer, the background? I'm just curious. Do you know?
I don't know.
looks fantastic, whatever it is.
Thank you. I'll be sure to pass that on.
Yeah.
A contest.
Have a contest.
It's an onion bag.
Onion bag.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I believe it.
No, it's an oyster bag.
Oyster bag.
Yeah.
I'll let the scientists guess what that is.
Looks like it's some sort of, I'm a biomedical guy, so looks like it's some sort of a signaling path
Okay.
of some sort, but
Pretty regular, though.
This is
Yeah.
actually a fun game.
It is.
Dissect the image, I love it.
It's like a fishnet to me.
Yeah, my guess is it's man-made.
Yeah.
But if it's used for, bio, what
Yeah,
it must
could be
have.
for collecting. Yeah.
Yeah, onions are bio, right?
Yes, they are.
True.
this gives me an idea. Put something interesting, right? So we can talk about it.
We'll just say it's a resorbable mesh.
Ah,
There you go.
Ah. Certainly be.
Just going to wait another minute. We have 20, we're up to 30.
It usually takes at least 5 to 10 minutes to get everyone here.
Okay.
Considering some people might be parents getting their kids settled into school or off to school.
Sure.
Junie, how are things at Venture?
We are doing great, busy.
Good.
I was just thinking of Brian because I moderated 2 panels on Tuesday. We hosted the Rise Women's Leadership Conference.
Yes.
And that was fun. It was nice. It wasn't really hybrid, but the team from Rise was in our space. So they produced it. They produced the virtual event out of our space.
Yes.
But it was nice to feel a little bit normal in the space. It felt very activated on Tuesday. So that was fun.
That's good.
Yep. And I think you popped on right after I said we have 3.5 hours of esports programming in our Venture Cafe Thursday gathering today. And we're doing it in partnership with our Venture Cafe Cambridge
How fun.
team. So that should be fun. I'm excited, actually. I learn something every week.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this program and I'm excited for the next.
Tuni, you'll be able to write a book.
You know what I love too? It keeps me out of back-to-back meetings. This is, as much as I'm, responsible for programming for many hours every Thursday, it's a nice break from the week. I guess I'm learning just enough to be dangerous in lots of different areas, right?
Yes.
It's 9:04.
Go. Carol knows my philosophy, 2 minutes after the hour.
So I'll just hand it off to you and say, welcome, everyone. Very excited. I'm the Executive Director of District Hall Venture Cafe Providence, and we're always excited to partner with Carol and the Rhode Island Bio team. We're very proud of the growth we've seen. Bio life sciences is the fastest growing sector in Rhode Island's economy, as you all must know. And I'm happy to support it in any way I can. And we have a lot of very robust programming in partnership with Rhode Island Bio and NEMIC. So please stay tuned, and you're all on our email list. So I hope to see you all again in future programs. And I guess it's time to take it away, Carol.
Thank you, Toonie. Really appreciate Venture Cafe hosting this for us, and for all your team who are always great to work with, and you for all your support. So thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. My name is Carol Malice, and I'm the Executive Director of Rhode Island Bio, Rhode Island's life sciences trade organization. We serve as Rhode Island's voice for the life sciences economy, and we offer our members advisory services, training, access to resources, and information sharing like this morning's webinar. Today's forum is intended to showcase drug R&D activities in the state's research and development labs and our biotech and pharma companies, and it will bring together representatives from academia in life sciences to discuss Rhode Island's current drug discovery efforts and future partnership capacity. So our forum is drug discovery, as you see, turning ideas into enterprises. So it's all about taking the research that's going on at our prestigious universities like URI and Brown and turning those ideas into commercialized products and services. So very excited to have our panel and our guests with us this morning. The forum is presented by Rhode Island Bio, by Bio, and Rhode Island INBRE, a collaboration of 8 participating research institutions, and Driven, whose mission is to connect academic innovations and entrepreneurship. And Driven has 2 designees in Rhode Island, URI's Bangsup Cho, who's with us this morning, the director of Rhode Island INBRE, and Brown's Senior Associate Dean Ed Harrod. And this event is actually co-sponsored by both of those groups. So just a few meeting logistics to everyone on the call this morning. Please keep your microphone muted, but you're welcome to have your screen on so we can see you and know that you're there. You'll be able to use the chat function to ask questions throughout this morning's discussion. And we'll also have opportunity for Q&A at the end of the panel discussion. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Peter Snyder, the Vice President for Research and Economic Development and Professor of Biomedical Sciences at URI, who is going to offer welcome remarks on behalf of Rhode Island INBRE. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Carol. I appreciate it. And good morning, everybody who has called in. We have a wonderful attendance this morning, as well as our terrific panelists for today. The Rhode Island INBRE is pleased to co-sponsor this event with Rhode Island Bio, with Driven, with the Venture Cafe, and with our partners at other major research institutions, particularly Brown, and the companies that have been forming in the state of Rhode Island as a result of all the efforts over the past several years and the growth that we've all been experiencing in the biomedical sector. The INBRE facility, as Carol noted, is a high-tech facility to support advanced biomedical research across 8 institutions. And we see this as a critical mission for advancing biotech and biomed in the state of Rhode Island. It's been serving a phenomenal purpose for so many years for so many of our researchers and students who have gone on to tremendous advanced careers on their own, including leading and starting companies in the biomedical space. And you're going to hear from at least one of our former graduates who went through the INBRE program during his training during this morning's presentation. URI is pleased to play home for the INBRE facility. It's an honor for us. And our hope over the next year or two is to create a more open, user-centered experience for new biotechs to gain access to our facilities, to our core laboratories, in order to work in partnership with Commerce RI, with Rhode Island Bio, and with other trade organizations to grow our biomedical economic base in the state of Rhode Island. URI takes this very seriously, and we are working to create a system where new companies can easily understand all the great facilities, equipment, technologies, and mostly expertise amongst our faculties at our various universities that can be brought to bear on their work as they choose to build companies here in the state of Rhode Island. So that's where we intend to go. We have a fantastic foundation. And as you all hear this morning, there's a lot to brag about here in Little Rhode Island in the sector of pharmaceutical development. We all hope that this work will advance our economy for sure, but we also are facing so many issues, medical and otherwise, as a society, as a culture, as a country, and we are aiming to develop therapeutics that change lives, that save lives and change lives. That's what drives most of us. And I welcome you all here today for such important work and sharing. And I'm just pleased to be a part of it. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you, and we really appreciate your partnership, and it's been such a pleasure to work with you and everyone at URI, so thank you very much. Now I'd like to welcome our moderator for this morning's panel, Brian Morley, who is the founder of Emerge Health Rhode Island. Brian's expertise is in market strategy and commercial execution, so I believe he'll be the perfect moderator for this group. He's also one of our Rhode Island Bio Life Science Advisors, a new council that we formed of knowledge experts who provide an extended network for our Rhode Island Bio board and for our members to collectively advance life sciences within our ecosystem. So we have a group now of life science advisors, and Brian is going to help us launch this group as well. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everybody. So as Peter and Carol alluded to, we are definitely going to showcase technology and science throughout the days and help also, showcase on business, kind of the business side of the stories. But what the intent of our panel today is, we actually have 4 very talented, very successful entrepreneurs. And the intent of today is for them to kind of share their stories and share their journey. So they will touch on the science and the technology, but it's really kind of to share that journey with you. And I think what you're going to see and hear throughout the next hour, you're going to hear examples of hard work and sacrifice and creativity. You're going to hear examples of resourcefulness and resiliency and flexibility. And then also a little bit of luck. And you'll probably hear each one of them talk about luck. But I feel like the luck comes when all the other things are done right. So hopefully you'll pick up some examples of that. I'm gonna kick it around the horn for each one of our entrepreneurs and panelists to introduce themselves, what they're doing, kind of the focus area, the disease state they're in, and where their business is at. But before I do that, I want to share with you, each one of them has a little something unique about them, and I'm going to ask them at the end to share what that little unique thing is. And for you attending this, we'll have someone who's a rower, someone who's a wrench head who buys and sells cars, someone who's an adrenaline junkie who actually does motocross and flies helicopters, and someone who is a musician. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So feel free to write those down and see if you can guess who's who. And by the end, I'll ask our panelists to reveal which one is which. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask Johnny Page Bolton to kind of introduce himself, We'll go around the horn and have each one introduce themselves in about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll kick things off with the questions. So Johnny, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian, and good morning, everyone. Before I introduce myself, I just want to say a huge thank you to Carol Malice and Rhode Island Bio for having us. We're thrilled to be here today. Thank you to Rhode Island INBRI and Driven for co-sponsoring this event, and thanks to District Hall and Venture Cafe for making it possible. So my name is Johnny Page. I'm the founding CEO of Bolden. I'll give you a little bit of background on my education because that's kind of how I ended up in this role. I went to Brown as an undergraduate. I studied music and neuroscience. Oh, I might have just given it away, sorry. And I studied music and neuroscience, and then as I joined Justin Fallon's lab, who's also on this call as a scientific founder of Bolden. I joined his lab as a senior, studying ALS. I was very interested in this work, and at the time I was there was another project that was emerging that is what we're going to share with you today, was related to it, and I was just fascinated by this work, so I wanted to keep on with it, and I talked with Justin about the possibility of doing a master's. He was enthusiastic about that, so it turned into a master's thesis doing behavioral research in the field of neurogenesis. So I graduated with my master's in May of 2019. And at that time, both the work coming out of Justin and our other scientific co-founder, Ashley Webb's labs, as well as a surge of very relevant clinical literature came out. The translatable nature of our work became very clear. And at that point in my life, I had known that I always wanted to become a doctor, and I was applying to medical school at that time, but I was in a gap year, and this opportunity presented itself, and we've kind of run with it. So in November of last year, so we're coming up on almost a year now, Bolden was founded, and the main mission of Bolden is to develop therapeutics targeting this novel signaling pathway that's been identified in these 2 Brown labs. So in January, Justin can elaborate on this too when he introduces himself, but in January, the founders received a $500,000 foundation award to screen drug candidates against this signaling pathway, and then ultimately to test them in Alzheimer's mouse models. Since we're targeting neurogenesis, this is the process of making newborn neurons in the adult brain. And it wasn't really until last year that a ton of clinical evidence supports that adult neurogenesis is a robust phenomenon that occurs throughout life, even into older adults who are in their 80s or 90s. But it plummets dramatically, not only in Alzheimer's disease, but also in other disease states like traumatic brain injury, depression. It's implicated in the recovery from stroke as well. So right now, where we are as a company is we're continuing to look for sources of funding. We've applied for a number of grants that we're waiting on, and other sponsored work, having conversations with foundations, having early conversations with investors. And in the meantime, even though COVID has kind of set us back a little bit, we're continuing to make progress on screening candidates. And our goal ultimately is to create something that can help patients. And so we're hopeful that the compounds we're working on, if they're safe and they're effective in preclinical models, we're hoping that these compounds will be able to enhance this process of neurogenesis in the adult brain and hopefully mitigate some of the terrible effects of these diseases.
Thank you, Johnny. And maybe we'll pass it over to Justin as a kind of a smooth transition. So Justin, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your focus area and kind of where your company's at as well. You are on mute, my friend.
So thank you, Brian, and all. And the first thing that really is remarkable about this gathering is this is my second time around in terms of being an entrepreneur, and all entrepreneurs are serial entrepreneurs. And the first time there was nothing like this in Providence or in Rhode Island. And so it's really very energizing and positive to see such a mass now building of activity around commercialization, around biotech, around development of therapeutics. So that's a terrific thing. By way of background, I am a professor of neuroscience at Brown. I've been here since 1996. And my interest all along, from really the time I started in science, was doing basic science on problems that are relevant, potentially relevant to disease, and particularly neurological disease has always been my interest, ranging from axonal guidance during my training to formation of synapses and their plasticity later on, and then muscular dystrophy. And currently, as Johnny has said, really looking for a novel therapy for not only Alzheimer's disease, but also other devastating neurological disease that affect memory and brain function. And in each case, my particular modus operandi has been choose a scientific problem where we don't know very much, understand as best we can the underlying mechanism of it, how it works, look under the hood. And when we do that, ask, are there levers that we can pull and we can intervene that will allow us to take these basic science insights and move them into into a drug development path. And I first did that with a company I founded back in late 2000, Tyverson, on Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And we were developing a biologic for treating that disorder, devastating disorder for children who have it. And we came a long way, tremendous, about $15 million raised total. And it was extremely rewarding and active activities. Then as Johnny mentioned, we again went back to the bench, and we were engaged, Ashley Webb and myself, in this question of how do you control new neurons being formed in the brain? So we know, as Johnny said, that there are stem cells that are resident in our brain. And these stem cells, we all have them. They're capable of making new neurons, and they're making neurons in all of us as we speak. True story. And so, and those are really important neurons because they are young, they are learning machines. So when these new neurons form, they're like a 5-year-old who can pick up a language, by walking down the street and talking to her friends, right? We can't do that anymore, but they certainly can. And the reason is that basically all their neurons are like that. We've done trade-offs for speed, et cetera, but we have these new neurons that are formed all the time, and we need those for learning. We all need those for learning. And they are forming. Now, in Alzheimer's, as Johnny said, the rate just plummets. It goes down to almost nothing. And why is that? Why are these stem cells no longer producing new neurons? And so working with Ashley, we discovered a way why they're essentially something standing on the brakes and preventing these neurons from growing. We discovered what those brakes were, and we discovered a way to sort of release the lever and have those brakes taken off, put off the brake, and now allowing new neurogenesis. And that's really the idea behind the whole behind Bolden. And so, as Johnny said, I've been fortunate to get grants to do that. We formed a company. David Potter, who's on this call, has been immensely useful. We'll talk about this more. You got to have IP. David stepped right up and made sure that happened. This is a partnership with Brown, and we formed our corporate, our executive chairman of the board, who you'll hear more about, who has a lot of investing experience, our legal, our corporate, our patent attorneys, et cetera. So it has been immensely exciting, and happy to share and talk more about this as we go forward.
Great, thank you, Justin, and thank you, Johnny, for kind of sharing the two sides of the Bold story thus far. Nick, Alcinous, go.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here, and on behalf of Alcinous. So probably wondering the name Alcinous Pharmaceuticals, where it came from. It's actually Greek for Mighty Mind Therapeutics. It's also a character from Homer's Odyssey, and this character in particular was a king who was basically responsible for helping Odysseus get home, and that's essentially what what we're after, is getting our patients home. So, but aside from that, a little bit about myself and my background. My training is largely steeped in pharmaceutical sciences as a whole. And my specialization is in pharmacology and toxicology. But really what I'm after is trying to understand how drugs work and how we can make them better, how we can optimize them. That's sort of been my philosophy for just about everything in life, is how can we make this better? And so I started this company with two other lab mates of mine and good friends, Ken Rose and Ben Barlick, who couldn't be here today. But essentially we came together, we started doing a lot of work with computer-aided drug design and modeling. So after, night after night, kind of, I'd say doing this in our garage, so to speak, but like all many great startups, emerge, we kind of did this on our own free time, just sort of as a hobby, and really just wanted to see how we could, get a target nailed down with a particular molecule of interest. And so I did have some slides for you guys, but I just wanted to keep this, loose and a little more informal, just to, really, share our story. So we had our background, we have a little bit of our technology. Now, the disease state that we're interested in is in ovarian cancer in particular. Why ovarian cancer? Well, just because once a woman actually gets diagnosed with this, there's about a 48% chance that they will survive beyond 5 years. And so for us, and especially in this day and age, we felt like that wasn't really acceptable. But more so, this particular cancer actually leads to some severe issues in terms of drug resistance. Now, the standard of care is actually pretty basic, and that's largely non-specific. So it actually kills both the cancer cell and also your healthy, non-affected cells. So we felt that we could try to address this issue by trying to go after some of these toxicities. And that's sort of really been our core focus. Now, I wish I could share what the actual target was, but due to the nature of how competitive this industry is, I can't really do that. All I can really say is it's involved in DNA repair. And so it's painful for me because I love the science and it's just so darn interesting. And again, we're just not quite there just yet to really start, pulling the covers off of this. But from the beginning, we were able to actually work with Reliant Commerce Corporation to basically try to turn this idea from in silico to reality. We were able to get 2 innovation vouchers to partner with the University of Rhode Island to actually make this small molecule inhibitor. And then from there, we were actually able to secure an investment for up to $600K from the Slater Technology Fund. All of that together really, kind of put things in motion for us in these past few years. I'm not going to talk about COVID because I'm like many of you, I have COVID fatigue and I just want to keep moving forward. So that's all you're going to get out of me when it comes to COVID. I'm telling you that right now.
Amen.
Yeah. So, and I mean, really in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we do. And, just really, really, fortunate and lucky to be with the panel that we have today.
Great, thank you, Nick. Moses, you're back in cleanup.
I'm muted here. So I'm having a little difficulty with the internet. I may have to shut off the video. Please, somebody interrupt me if it's getting weird, and I'll shut it off. But it's on.
You sound good so far.
Okay, let's see how it goes. Well, first of all, thank you to the organizers. I think that as I'll describe in a minute, my journey has kind of taken me away from the Rhode Island area, although I came through Brown, graduated Brown Medical School, did most of my research work at Brown, and come from a family that's been here for hundreds of years. But more recently, you know, I've been drawn away to the business opportunity in Boston, like I guess many of us will be. I suppose that really is part of the story. So I'll start with the end. The story is my most recent startup, which was called Sema Therapeutics, has been acquired by Vertex Pharmaceuticals. So that's awesome at many levels, and I can certainly discuss that, you know, from sort of a career development point of view with people. Vertex, though, is publicly traded and very formal. So like Nick, I really can't talk too much science at this point. But I think that what's almost more interesting to what I imagine is the group on the call is how the story evolved and how it all got started. So I'll go back to the beginning and just confess that I had absolutely no intention early in my career of having anything to do with research or pharmaceutical development. I was a young academic general surgeon, had just in 1986 been recruited by the government of Zambia to start a flying doctor service in the northern part of the country. And I had some, what I thought was going to be a brief gap to fill in some of my training before actually embarking. I did that working in the Department of Pediatric Surgery at Rhode Island Hospital, and the people in that department were anxious to develop a kind of a research function, and they asked me to get involved in research. They didn't really know where to start to develop their own research, so they were looking for getting some training, and I started working with people at Women and Infants, and also at the time, a very relevant person was Pierre Galletti, who was the actual founder, I think, of Brown University's medical school. And I joined his lab because he did a lot of vascular surgery research, and I was trained as a vascular surgeon. So that led to a sort of a cascade of events. What was really interesting about Dr. Galletti to me at the time, although he was a giant in the field of artificial organ development with membrane oxygenators and dialysis and all that sort of thing. What was interesting to me is he had this concept of so-called encapsulated cell transplantation, with the original indication being diabetes. So the idea, without getting too deeply into it, was that you could somehow get islets of Langerhans. Pigs were the target source at the time, this is in 1986, and put them inside a perm-selective membrane that would act as a molecular sieve and keep out the immune system, allow the cells on the inside to survive and to experience host blood sugar levels and respond with appropriate amounts of insulin. Looking back in 1986, and in the arrogance of the time, the assumption was this was just a no-brainer. We were going to knock it dead in no time and all, make a ton of money and then move on to something else. I guess one of the most humbling sort of experiences in this whole process for me was that turned out to be much more difficult than any of us thought. So at any rate, the job in Zambia blew up, as I believe I mentioned, for reasons on the Zambian side. Politics are more complicated than medicine, I think, there. I ended up embarking on a career which resulted in a series of biotech companies. The first one was called Cytotherapeutics, which was, I think, the largest biotech in Rhode Island so far. It raised $140 million, existed for 10 years, and had 140 FTEs. Eventually, it
Moses, I think we lost you for a sec there.
Encapsulation tech. Are we good still?
You froze for
a moment.
10 seconds.
And I'm kind of out of time anyway. So, so to make it a long story short, where are we? It's getting weird here. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. At any rate, Cytotherapeutics was rebranded, and I was able to take the cell encapsulation technology out and use it to found a company called Neurotech, which is still in business, attempting to treat diseases of the eye. It was originally for retinitis pigmentosa. And then it proceeded from there. I left Neurotech, retained an interest in treating diabetes, and ultimately our real break came when investors in Boston discovered a program at Harvard in Doug Melton's lab that showed he could develop islets of Langerhans or islet of Langerhans-like tissue from embryonic stem cells. And that really opened the gates once again to the opportunity to develop encapsulated cell transplantation. In about 1990, you couldn't sell it to anyone. But as soon as you convinced investors that there was a cell source that might really work, the floodgates kind of opened again, and there was interest from major pharmaceutical companies and VCs and so forth. And so Semma was founded, and within 3 years, I guess, acquired by Vertex, and I work now as a
It froze up there again, but I think,
okay.
That's okay. But you know, thank you for sharing that. And you know, for those of you that are listening in with Moses' story, I know it was a 4-minute version, but if you think about kind of where he thought he was going to be and what his goal and focus was in time frame in the mid 80s to get this thing to the market and then be done with it, versus the journey that this technology actually took of encapsulated cell transplantation of a 35-year arc to actually find its home. It's pretty, I think that's a pretty amazing story to understand that, you know, we don't really know where our journey is going to take us and how long it's going to be. But once again, that kind of resilience that he put out there and kind of keeping the eyes open stands out to me as a key kind of factor. Johnny, I'm going to ask you real quick. What's your why, man? What motivates you to do what you do? I think that's important for everyone to understand of what's everyone's reason that they're doing this.
Thanks, Brian. So I think there are a number of things. For one thing, there's the sort of right place and the right time aspect. You know, I joined a lab in the middle of you know, very exciting developments. As I mentioned, I would be going on to medical school, but I had a year where I wasn't a student. I just finished my master's. So in terms of timing in my life and in terms of the scientific development, you know, it just fit. In terms of my own motivations, neurological disease is something that's deeply personal to me. In particular, Alzheimer's disease. All of my grandparents have either passed away from dementia or currently have dementia. And my mom, 6 years ago, upended her life. She was living in New York City at the time, and she moved to across the country to Los Angeles after my grandmother had had a couple of car accidents. She was living alone because my grandfather had passed. And so my mom has been caring for my grandmother 24/7 for 6 years, and you know, has kept her happy and able to live in the environment in which she's comfortable. And so that, to me, that, you know, it just shows the tremendous impact that this disease can have on not only the patients, but on also the people that surround them, family and friends and caregivers. So in particular, Alzheimer's for me is one that I really want to do whatever I can to help treat. And, you know, there's almost an aspect of a moral imperative because, you know, once we realize that this science could potentially have an impact and have a benefit, it's almost like an obligation to try to further it. So yeah, that's how I feel about it.
That's great. And you know, the reason I'm asking this is we all have our kind of why we do the things we do, but some of us keep it in a subconscious place, and I feel like it's always good to kind of bring it conscious and kind of share that with other folks that are on this line and figure out why are we really doing the things we do. Nick, share with me a little bit behind your motivation.
Yeah, so this is pretty much what keeps me going, why I do what I do. And to kind of understand that, got to go back to the beginning, the founding of Alcinus in 2016. So after that, around that time, I had just said goodbye to a family member due to cancer. And, previously to that, said goodbye to 2 other family members, relatives due to cancer as well. And so the one thing that's been burned in my mind, like so many other, families or caregivers, for people who are going through cancer, is the phrase from doctors that there's nothing more we can do. And for me, I felt like in this day and age and where we are with technology and with science, that really shouldn't be uttered anymore. And so that's why I wanted to try something, take a first step in the direction where, we could try to solve this problem. And I felt trying was better than just sitting and not doing anything, or just donating to a cause and hoping that they would figure it out. No, I myself, with the help of my colleagues and a lot of the great minds in Rhode Island, and I have to put an emphasis on that because that's one of the reasons why we started in Rhode Island as well, is just taking advantage of what we currently have in this great state. So, but that's really why I do what I do, is really just to to benefit the patient, so that they don't have to go through what I just went through and what my family had gone through as well. So that's really it.
Great, thank you. Justin, question. When we spoke before, you kind of gave me an example of almost like a lucky meeting that all of a sudden sparked this. Could you kind of go a little bit into that story and how it came about? You're on mute for a sec, Justin.
Chance favors the prepared mind, I think, is what you really, so there is luck, which certainly seems to be the case at the time, but there's far more than that. I just wanted to pick up on that. As entrepreneurs, we have to embody what we want to do, what we want to accomplish. And one of the major things we need to do is not only to drive the science, create the science in our case, and then drive the translational effort to bring it to a therapeutic, but you also have to enroll people in joining your team and in, working with you, supporting you, dedicating parts of their lives and their money to what you're doing. And it is, so those kind of chance meetings are in one way a chance, another one not. So I will tell from my experience with Tyverson, we were working in a very mechanistic, again, how does the membrane of a muscle cell get organized? Muscle cells are very fragile membrane, so they have to be supported if they're going to undergo the kind, generate the force that they need to force without breaking themselves up. And we were figuring out how that was done, and we had realized that we had a way where we could actually modulate that. And no company or anything. And a Brown alum came to visit one day, and my chair called me, "Can you talk to this fellow? I can't, I don't have time. Can you talk to him? He's interested in another disease." And so he came to the lab. I had no idea what this other disease was. I quickly Googled it. And then we started talking. And at the end of that meeting, I said, "And we're also working on muscular dystrophy." He said, "We need to talk." He was an investor. He was an MD, is an MD, had a hedge fund for a long time, knew, very deeply connected into the business and finance side of biotech. And he became the chairman of the board of Tyverson Pharmaceuticals. I didn't know this person before we met that day. He didn't know me. I think that this sort of connection can happen and is incredibly important, but I think one is always embodying your company and always communicating it and having it, people can realize what it is that they, what is available here. I mean, I'll say the same, it wasn't a chance meeting with Johnny, but I think the fact that Johnny stayed on and really move this from a good idea into something that, wait a minute, we have something here. Johnny was critical for that. And I think that, you know, people are everything in this effort. So yeah, it's chance, and it's not at the same, and it's, you know, at the same time, you know, there's fate, I think.
Great, thank you. Moses, you mentioned a couple turning points that occurred with your science and with your career. It seems like it's taken lots of twists and turns. How do you continue to stay focused? How do you continue to stay motivated?
I don't know. When I got into this in the beginning, as I said, I had no intention of getting into drug development. I was a general surgeon, so I'd spent a great deal of time taking care of diabetes complications, not the disease itself so much, but you know, wound care and amputations, etc. And in those days, the conventional management of diabetes was not nearly as good as it is now, and those complications were much, much more common. So it really seemed at the time that there was a pressing need for some more effective therapy that would not only treat the disease better, but would make patients' lifestyle much better as well. It's also an issue. So it was, you're right, it was very disappointing when I ran into the issue, which I think you know, underlies all of our efforts here, that translation is really, really hard. You know, it's relatively easy to come up with these scientific concepts and that appear to have a great deal of promise in the laboratory and in a university setting. But when you start making it into a drug, you discover that that's where the real problem is. That's where I discovered anyway. So I went through 13 years of kind of beating my head against the wall and changing targets. And, you know, it went from diabetes, which was particularly difficult because the cell mass that you had to transplant was like a cc of tissue, and that was very hard to do. So we started working with other indications like Parkinson's disease, ALS, HD, that could be potentially treated, we thought in those days, with growth factor delivery. And that's something that we really did do well. So it was a sort of a slow grind where you're constantly, I mean, in the beginning, it's very heady. There's tons of money. Everybody thinks that they're going to be done in 5 years or less. And then you start to hear the investors threaten, you know, you got to be successful. You got to do a deal. You got to do a partnership. That the company's at real risk of being folded up. And in reality, that's much more a threat than reality. But it hangs over you, and eventually it becomes true. So after 13 years of trying, the investors finally looked back at you across the boardroom table and said, I don't care what kind of success you think you're going to have in the next year or so, I'm done. And at that point, Cytotherapeutics was a publicly traded company, and they were just thinking about share price and serving the investors. So that was disappointing. But you know, it seems like once you've been in it, there's no shortage of ideas of how you can try and fix it and work around it. And so in this case, the basic technology had a lot of IP developed and invested in, and it was available at a discount. So I got it and moved it into another company, tried again, found a bunch of French investors and you know, took it through another round and then another. And I think there've been like 4, but it took a while to get to the point here where all the pieces finally came together. And as I said, I think before, the real piece was finding a tissue source that you could implant in our graft. And that was luck. I mean, really, it was luck. And not only was it luck that Doug Melton was successful with that when he was, but it was shocking to me that as soon as the investor community saw success in developing the cell type, they apparently had been thinking about this for decades and responded by saying, oh, now we can come up with a biologic therapy for diabetes. And they just lit up again. And all of a sudden they were looking for all the old people who did encapsulation, and we were at the front of the list. So it was an opportunity that the timing was luck. We were ready for it. But in the end, we got lucky.
Justin, kind of, since Moses kind of led into the investment side of things and the business side of things, I think this might be a natural transition for you with regards to when is the right time to start building out that board, start building out the different parts of the organization? How do you know when it is the right time? And I think more importantly, how do you know who are the right people for that?
Yeah, those are really important questions. I mean, Moses certainly touched on that and has lived it, you know, the right people at the right time, and what do you need? And I would say the overarching rule, if you will, or guidance is alignment, right? Is everyone that you have brought in aligned with not only your goals? I mean, it's very easy to say we're aligned around Alzheimer's therapy, and that's true, okay? But to actually, and it's authentic. But if you're talking to a venture capital firm who wants to double their money in 3 years, and you know it's going to take you 5 years, you're not aligned, right? And they may be the biggest, most famous, you know, venture capital there is, right? But it's the wrong people. Similarly, you need to work with people at the stage where you are, right? In terms of people who are very risk tolerant, okay, that will know that you have a difficult path ahead of you, and there will be roadblocks and obstacles and, you know, dead ends along the way. Absolutely, you can count on that. So there needs to be alignment in thought. There needs to be, at that same time, and this is what's so important, is that you have to do everything in science. What you do in basic science is you start with a question, and then you say, is that question important? And then what are the experiments that I can design that will allow me to address that question? And you have no idea what the answer will be. That's the fun part, because you don't know. That's why you answered the question in the first place. You asked it. In drug development, you have a very specific goal in mind from the moment you start. And you really need to have that end point in mind as you shape everything that you do. And so what you need to know is, where are you along that arc? And at different stages, you will need different people, different amounts of money, different expertise. You will become less important as things move forward. If you've done your job right, you will not be doing things next year, right? That's good, right? And I think that because the next stage of people are not, you know, not my expertise. I think that you have to have the vision of where it's going to go, but you have to understand that it's going to change. So I think that's alignment, absolutely critical. Get the guidance in people of what this whole arc is going to look like, because when you need it, you got to know what you need and who you need, how much you need, right? And to have people who, you know, are experienced, but not calcified in terms of, you know, traditional. Nowadays, we have a lot of entrepreneurs, and that's great. Back in the old days, we had a lot of people who were trained in big pharma who were actually quite siloed and didn't work in didn't have risk tolerance. I think now we have more of that around. And so that's what I look for. And I think that's what's crucially important.
So Nick, as a fairly new CEO, right? Take the science hat off for a second, the CEO hat on. How is that going? What's that experience like, going from scientist to CEO? What are some of the best parts of putting that hat on? And what are some of the more challenging parts from your perspective?
I think right off the bat, you know, it's kind of putting together that team, right? So someone had once posed a question to me, you know, what's more important, people or data? So the scientist in me says, okay, it's the data, obviously. And the CEO in me says, no, it's the people, because without people, you cannot get the data. For me, just kind of echoing what Justin just mentioned, when we're looking at advisors and we're trying to get that team established, it not only has to be the right person for the job at the time, but I always try to surround myself with people of where we want to be. And these are people who are risk averse, who have been in the startup field for a while, bring together, a large body of expertise in drug development, have an appreciation for, what it is that we're trying to do. And that's not just helping patients, but just really trying to shorten this drug development timeline as well. So it's taking all of that together, and, and that's really what kind of builds us. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I think one of the biggest parts of a CEO, and Justin alluded to it, Moses, as well, and you, is being that leader. And there's gonna be twists and turns to this thing, and everyone's gonna look to you. So as the leader, how do you keep your team focused, motivated, inspired, to keep waking up every day and doing the grind?
Right. I think it's important to kind of come back to our why we're doing this. I mentioned that, I was personally affected, by cancer, but my other two co-founders have been, significantly affected by it as well. So remembering our training, our passion for science, why we do what we do, that's what sort of drives us forward. And then also just remembering that we're really on the edge of the unknown. So we're seeing things that no one else gets to see. So that's ultimately what's exciting. So really, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but we know if we produce high quality science, bring in that data and surround ourselves with the people that really matter, that's what's going to be the key to our success going forward.
Johnny, similar question. As a new CEO, what's the best part about it, and what's not the best part about it?
Sure. Yeah. So it's definitely exciting. There are a couple times I've gotten on some Zoom calls, and people make an interesting face when they see me come up, because they're not sure who I am or how I fit into the team, because I might not look like the traditional biotech CEO, I guess. But
just say it. You don't look old.
Yeah. Right. But that being said, I really benefit tremendously from having an experienced team around me, both with Justin's prior experience with Tyverson, and also our executive chairman, Charlie Polsky, has been just a tremendous help to me. He's a physician, he's an investor, he's been on the board of lots of different early stage life science companies, and he served as CEO. So for me, I think that mentorship has been really, really key to my development. But it's fun, it's exciting, it's really gratifying to be part of leading the charge on something that I worked on in my education, and with Justin, who's now a colleague, who is a mentor, and it's so it's very gratifying. Some days are better than others, but I think for the most part, I'm very pleased with how things have been going, and so far I think it's been a really rewarding experience. And like I said, the main thing is that I'm just really privileged to have great guidance from people who have been through it before.
Great, thank you.
Brian, we have a couple of questions through our chat function. So can I send those off to you now?
Sure. Do you want to read them off, or?
Sure, I will read them. They're from Jessica Chalmers, and she's interested in hearing if anyone has had experience bringing a non-synthetic molecule to market, in her case for anti-cancer or antiviral. And she thought there seems like there'd be a less interest from pharma.
Not true.
There's Jessica. Jessica, do you want to ask your question directly? Go ahead.
Wasn't expecting to speak. Yeah, we're working with seaweed molecules and hoping to develop a kind of following on some research that we've read about, but haven't, really followed up on where to start up. Would like to, we're going to investigate how to address the really strong antiviral properties of some of the molecules in a particular kind of seaweed. We're thinking of going the anti-cancer route because there's more money in anti-cancer apparently than antiviral at the moment, even in spite of COVID. You know, maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, just, you know, we're just at the point where we're trying to figure out the best approach. So I thought I'd throw it out there.
Very possible. There's a division of the FDA that governs this. It's the same division that reviews what I do. It's called Biologics, CBER, Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. You can Google that, and there's all sorts of guidance about how to work with products that have a natural derivation. Your problem will be just like what I was talking about before. It's translation. It's how do you purify this molecule? How do you identify it? How do you figure out its potency, or the classic things? But I wouldn't be for a moment discouraged. It's very possible. Manufacturing's tough, but it's possible.
We have that set up, the investigation into the purity and figuring out which molecule and which seasonal variant of the molecule. We don't have the connection with a cancer researcher or an antiviral researcher in this area yet, just so you know.
I'm sure you can find one, but
yeah.
Good luck. I don't. Yes, I'm not one, but I'm sure you can find one. They exist. There's no shortage of enthusiasm for these sorts of things. Just scratch around.
Yeah, I would agree completely with Moses. And the other thing that I would key on, Jessica, is your intellectual property. That's a crucial piece, because at some point, if investors are going to put money in, they're going to want to have something that's protected, and that's the IP. Yep. And so and it's completely possible to get IP on this. So I wouldn't be deterred on that, but I would be very focused on it, and to get, you know, your tech transfer office to just begin to work there, because again, unless that's a crucial piece. It's not the entire piece, but it's a foundational one. And but the idea, I mean, this is going to be obviously, you know, very different class of molecules, very exciting. So, you know, protect the IP and then link up, as Moses said, with, you know, to begin to get the basic assays. And yeah, watch out for what they call chemistry, manufacturing, and controls, or CMC, because that's where translation, the rubber hits the road. Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
Actually, so, is it okay? I apologize. Maybe Jessica and Justin, can we go offline? Because I know we have a bunch more questions.
We certainly can. I'd be happy to talk about it. But if you just Google CMC,
yep,
you will you'll see it all, and I'd be happy to talk more about it.
Okay, thanks so much.
But also find a mentor somewhere here. You know, it's maybe through Emerge, maybe it's through Slater, some sort of a contact. You maybe talk to Justin about it, or it was, I'm sure, better connected here than I am at the moment, at least. But it sounds to me like you just need a little help to, you know, to get you your first couple of connections, and then you'll figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So we have another question, and this was from Jessica as well, about the benefits of staying in Rhode Island. Does it matter where we're located these days? Why should we stay here versus being lured by opportunities in Massachusetts? I understand that there are great researchers at the various Rhode Island universities, but the funding resources seem to be lesser. So can we have some comments on that? Why should we stay in Rhode Island?
Why not stay in Rhode Island?
Seafood.
It's true, there is more money in Massachusetts. It's much more competitive. My sense is that you will have an easier time if you can get some startup funding from Slater, and then you can decide then what your next jump is going to be, or an SBIR. But I don't know whether you're currently university affiliated or not, you do an STTR or whatever, but you know, a federal grant, SBIRs are easy to get, really easy, and phase one. And it's an educational process that will really get you started in this whole field. So I would start Googling how to do an SBIR. You can get a lot of help from, people like Brian and from Slater. And there's help here in Rhode Island. My guess is that this is well suited to you,
Okay.
Rhode Island.
And Jessica, just to elaborate, I think everyone on this call is a resource, right? Everyone on this is a resource, and each one of these folks has a story of how they've connected academics to help fund and help develop the science, and then take it to the next level of bringing the advisory group and the board group that's all established here, to then kind of get it to the next level, and then to scale as well, where Moses and Justin have those experience. So from my 60,000 foot view is you have the infrastructure here, you have the oversight of Rhode Island Bio and several others. Start utilizing them, and they'll start laying out the program for you where you need it. So you have the resources, you have the infrastructure, you have the science and the funding. So that would be me. That'd be my take.
That's a
Yeah, and
great.
I would just say one more thing. Don't let not knowing stop you. Every day you will not know things. Don't let it stop you, and just keep going and find out where it is. Yeah.
When I was at your stage, what I found was that encouragement is more valuable than advice.
Yes.
You just need somebody to keep pushing you to take the first step, and it'll work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So
Carol.
we're talking about ecosystem. We have Ravi from India, who's joined us this morning, and he said he's very inspired by our working on building companies in Rhode Island. And his question is, how much is an ecosystem, a big one like Cambridge sitting next to us, how much does that help? And is related to access to capital, VCs, catalyzing the translation of science. How important is being close to a larger cluster to us in Rhode Island?
Hi, Carol. This is Dave Potter from Brown with a kind of a point of view on that one. I think that if there's any advantages that can be cited by the increased Zoomification of interactions, what we're talking about in terms of in making our ecosystem more visible, obtainable, and elastic. And what I mean by that is we're talking to Connecticut Innovations, who have a lot of talent of entrepreneurs from both the business and science community. And for them, working with a Rhode Island-based company that has interesting IP and other aspects is not necessarily a big issue at all. And similarly, folks up at Mass Ventures also have networks and capital access and other resources that the fact, in some cases, yes, there are political and geographic barriers to the free flow of assets. But increasingly, and I defer to Carol's point of view on this as well, we're seeing much more willingness and, in fact, eagerness to mine, M-I-N-E, mine the IP we have down here in Rhode Island that is just becoming more and more visible to the Boston, Cambridge, to the Connecticut ecosystems. So.
Well, Dave, thanks for your comments on that. That's really helpful. I know you've been very active in both markets and bringing all of your experience back to us in Rhode Island. And that's one of the reasons why we became a bio affiliate, is to be able to share the blueprints and best practices of other bios in the country, and particularly in our region with Mass Bio, BioConnecticut, New York Bio, and others, to see how we can grow the economy in the life sciences space regionally and really take advantage of our different assets and capabilities. So there's much more talk about how to do things like that, and more collaboration, and you will hear that when we have our next guest speaker from MassBio who will address that. But I think, you know, we're stronger together, as Toonie would say, and working as a unit to advance life sciences. And you know, Rhode Island is known for neuroscience, medical device advancement and technology, and is recognized in the Brookings report for those two areas as being highly concentrated in Rhode Island. So we need to take those assets and really elaborate more on them, share them with the greater public, which is why we're having a session like this one this morning, is to let people know what is going on in R&D, what is going on in industry development that we can really run with here in Rhode Island. Turn it back to you, Brian.
Okay, no more questions on the chat, or are we?
I don't see any other questions, but this is a great time for people to ask questions if they have them, or people who have a viewpoint that they want to share with us.
So if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and Carol will be able to call on you, or fire the question through the chat. And if you don't, I'll keep things going on my end. So maybe I'll wait for a couple minutes before we reveal the hobbies of our panelists. But I do want to kind of also think about, you know, there's the scientific part of this, there's the business piece of this, but then there's also the personal piece. And I feel like we've kind of touched on each one. But you know, for the folks on the line, just kind of understand the sacrifice and that's being made by each one of these individuals to drive their initiatives. Tell us a little bit, maybe Nick, I'll go to you. You know, you're early in your journey, you're recently married. Tell us from a personal perspective, what are some of the key things that you think to allow you to do what you do from a personal perspective? What are some of those things that you feel like you have that are allowing you to do this?
Right. Well, I think first and foremost, you know, when you are an entrepreneur, life ain't easy. There's going to be some sacrifices that you're going to have to make. There's also going to have to be some level of understanding that those around you are going to have to really take stock of. You know, when you are an entrepreneur, there really is no clocking in, clocking out. You know, you are working all the time. You know, I think about, you know, what we could be doing at Alcinus day in and day out, how to improve it, how to get an extra sliver of data, you know, how to, you know, make a connection, you know, how to get that, you know, get the next piece of the puzzle, really. And so having a partner, I mean, being in a relationship, you know, my wife has been a real supporter of this, and just having that level of understanding too, that like, hey, you know, I'm going to be working, you know, 11 o'clock at night, almost midnight, burning the midnight oil, you know, that is something that's incredibly important to have. But even then, just on a more basic level, just your family, in my opinion, is a huge bedrock of keeping things moving forward for you. So.
Great. Yeah, I think that's an important message that everyone has to be thinking about as well, right? It's more than just the science and the business. It's your support system at home that's going to allow you to do that. Justin, can you tell me about some connections within Rhode Island that has allowed you to kind of spark, whether it's Bolton or previous initiatives, to kind of accelerate some of the businesses you've been working on? You're on mute, my friend.
Thank you. It was very important in Tiverson, actually, for the business and fundraising side. And as I mentioned earlier, this chance connection with a Brown alum, John Nicholson, he gathered around, his vision for Tiverson was this was going to be a very Brown company. And in terms of, so he got a lot of other alums who were in, you know, finance, et cetera, who had resources to be to invest in it. And so that was always part of the fabric of that. And so we benefited from that part of it as well, which was important. I think that those kinds of relationships were key in that sense. Yeah. You're muted now, Brian.
I think, yeah, thank you. Tag, I'm it. So I know we have to transition pretty soon, but maybe if I can have, when we spoke earlier, I did ask each one of our panelists, like what Neil said, or Nick said, everything that you do, you're giving it your all. And it's not an 8-hour day. You're not punching a clock. Your mind is always in it. Your body's in it, right? It's a lot of stress to do what you're doing. And I said, what are some of the things that you do to unplug from that stress, recharge the battery, to maintain your energy and your drive and prevent burnout? So that maybe we'll reveal each individual's kind of what they do to unplug and to recharge the battery. So let's see, who should I start with? Moses. What?
I knew it'd come around.
Which one were you?
I'm the one that was the motocrosser.
Yeah.
Still ride with my kids, still love it. Getting a little old for it. I don't crash with quite so much impunity anymore, but I do crash. And I was dumb enough to think that I could run another company on the side at one point. Had a helicopter company. It was called Secana Aviation. It was around for about 10 years. And it was a great education for me, and taught both my kids how to fly helicopters. And I don't know, I grew up with machines working on farms, and I love them. That's what I do on the side.
All right, great. So machines, let's see, who's the other wrench head on the call that might be a car enthusiast?
Not you.
Ooh, we're waiting. Who would that be? Who's the car collector? Nick?
Yeah, that's going to be me. Yeah, so I'm a huge gearhead. Oddly enough, kind of like Moses. Actually, I live basically on a farm. I'm in Rehoboth. We're basically known for two things: golf courses and farms. But my hobby, my pastime, has always been just taking things apart and trying to figure out how they work and putting them back together. Very much like pharmacology, right? Figuring out how drugs work and really in the body, putting them back together. But cars for me have always been a lifelong hobby. I'm currently restoring a 1969 Camaro, and one of the original pony cars. And as a hobby as well, I buy 454 big block.
454, okay.
Yeah. So just a lot of horsepower. Unfortunately, it still has drum brakes, so trying to retrofit that for some newer things. But I mean, I can go on and on and on about that until I'm blue in the face, have just a separate seminar on that. But as a hobby, even before I could drive, I was just buying and selling cars. So I've had no less than 10 cars already since I've been driving, and just buy them, fix them up, sell them, and just keep on trading up. So that's what I do.
Great. So now the question is, was Johnny's little mention at the beginning a red herring, or is herring, or was that true? But let's go to Justin. And Justin, what do you do to make sure you don't burn out?
Yeah, well, I grew up on Long Island, and whenever you're on Long Island, you're never far from the water. And one of the great attractions of Rhode Island, at the Ocean State, is that you are also never far from the water. And so what I do is most mornings I am on the water in a racing shell, in a single, rowing. And I find that, so on the Seekonk, and it is an amazing way to start the day. It's both contemplative and meditative, so one can lose oneself in turn off the monkey brain and at the same time have a very good workout as well. So that's absolutely critical for maintaining the sanity, along with the support system at home, as Nick said, absolutely crucial.
Great. And I guess we have our answer on who the musician is, but Johnny, tell us a little bit about how you prevent burnout and unplug and clear your mind.
Sure. Yeah. And actually, what's funny is another two things that Justin and I have in common. I actually rowed in high school, and I haven't been rowing for a while, but I would still call myself a rower, I guess. And Justin and my mutual passion for jazz music is actually how we ended up with the name Bolden, named after Buddy Bolden, the kind of iconic mythical figure who invented jazz. So, but yeah, so I am a musician, and I think I said to you on the call, Brian, that depending on the day, I'll play something different. If I've had a happy day and I feel like being contemplative and just relaxing, I'll play some jazz trombone or something like that. If I've had a frustrating day, I'll hop on my drum set and play some rock and roll or something like that. But music for me has always been a really big part of my life. Both my parents were professional musicians. So I've been playing music my whole life, and it's what I do for fun.
Great. Well, thank you. So, hopefully we're about to wrap the panel up, but I just want to thank all four of you for taking time to share your stories and share your insight on, this journey. Each one of you has had a different journey, and you're in different points. We don't know where the finish line is for anybody, which is exciting, right? But what I gathered out of this was that you're all putting in a ton of work and sacrifice. You're leading your teams. You're coming up with creative solutions when you're struck with potential impasses. You find a way around them. So the resourcefulness that you've brought to this, the resiliency is amazing. How that and then being flexible and listening and finding the resources within this state to allow you to get to that next level or to continue that journey in the next chapter. And I think like Justin said, luck favors the prepared. So the reason you guys are finding luck is because you're doing all those other things. So thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for answering the questions from me and also the folks online. I hope everybody else found this valuable and can take away some pearls of advice for their own journeys. And thank you again, and I'll pass it back to Carol.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate your leading our panel. It was a great session and interesting to learn not only about your sciences, but about your lives too. So really exciting. We're about to welcome our next guest speaker, Bob Coughlin, who has, I believe, stepped away for just a minute. So while we're waiting for him to come back, I thought this might be a good time just to ask everyone who's listening, what else would you like to hear from us? What other kinds of events would be of interest to you? If you want to just either put that in the chat or offer your opinion right now. Anyone? Okay, well, while we're waiting for Bob.
Carol, Jessica just added something, fundraising.
Okay.
Fundraising.
Fundraising, okay. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs on how to approach fundraising? What would be some good first steps? Anyone on the panel?
Moses?
I'd go to Slater, and I would start working on an SBIR. or SDTR, if that's what applies to you. SBIRs are a really easy start. Phase one are very generously granted. It gives you a little bit of a introduction or perhaps leverage with organizations like Slater. It makes it look like you're serious, and I think it does indicate that you're serious. It's a very easy way to put your first foot forward and to just get the whole process rolling.
Yeah,
I would
would
actually
agree.
go one step more. Sorry, Justin. I would actually have one more thing in between that. Actually work with Ryan Commerce Corp and look at the innovation vouchers just to sort of get some more preliminary data because as of late, especially if you're going to go for the NCI or cancer route, they are very, very competitive. The SBIR, STTR omnibus application. So even though the applications do not require preliminary data, to stand out, you will need it. So that's something that you're definitely going to have even before meeting with any VC firm or anything like that. But the initial steps, Rhode Island Commerce Corp, innovation voucher, work with the university, and then start applying for an SBIR and try to get those applications in as often as you can.
Yeah, don't let me mislead people. Phase two SBIRs are competitive. Phase one is the easy one.
Yeah.
Also, about
ones are hard too.
I hear that the innovation vouchers have been delayed because of the funding hasn't come through from the state government. Do you know anything about that? Maybe not.
Yeah, it's been a little bit delayed right now, but they traditionally have been very well funded and work with a lot of small businesses at various stages, even if it's just for ideation and concept development. That's what they're there for. So, but just make sure you're on the radar and just try to stay up to date with them as often as you can.
Yeah.
I think it probably worth making another comment here, and this is going back to some of the things that Johnny was saying about being a young CEO. I think that for scientists, doing a startup company, in the beginning, the CEO role is not all that difficult. It's like running a lab, and it's basically budget issues and a little bit of attracting personnel and so forth. But it's all occurring at a fairly logical and familiar in a logical and familiar way. Once you start to talk to VCs, the role of the CEO changes a lot. And I think that all of us, I mean, certainly I come from a tradition of scientists that are just brutally anchored to the very specific, clear, simple truth. And when you start working with VCs, that becomes a sort of a slippery concept. And they're looking for CEOs whose primary role is fundraising, who are willing to tell the story in a way that makes the scientists wince from time to time. So I think you need to decide which one you are, and to not hang on too long as a scientific founder and CEO into the period of time when people are really looking for more aggressive fundraising. I don't mean to paint a bleak picture here, but I've been through this several times, and every time I get to some point where I'm just a little bit uncomfortable about the way the story is being told, but that's the only way you're going to go forward. You've got to find your own peace with that, but it's more a matter of deciding if you're the right person to do that, and deciding when is the time to get someone else to do that for you, and to not be offended by the fact that they then run the company.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And someone told me early on in my science, it's, this whole thing is about the golden rule, and he with the gold rules. And so you just need to know that, right? And you will and should in some ways lose control as you go forward. And this gets back to the alignment, right? And the question about fundraising. Early on, that alignment is very clear in terms of SBIRs, in terms of Slater and vouchers. We're all very much aligned and in this together, and get this going, get the data, make the story. But then there'll be a transition, particularly with the larger funding, when people don't care a bit about the science. They just care about making money. They really don't care about the science. And so you just have to know that, right? And you have to know their where they're coming from. Literally, their alignment is about return on investment. So early on, I think the people who are truly interested in the problem and the disease, and the foundations certainly are really important. But then there'll come a time when that's not the case. And so you just have to be aware of that, and it will shift.
And the VCs will tell you they're all into science.
Oh, total BS. Total BS.
They talk very well. That's their greatest skill, I think.
Yeah.
Slater is not a VC though, right?
No. It's very different.
Okay.
Slater's an excellent organization. They're on your side.
Very genuine. My opinion.
All right, well, thank you all for your thoughts on that. And another suggestion is that we have more networking. So as you know, it's been a challenge to have all of our face-to-face events like we've had in the past at Venture Cafe and other places, but we can certainly do more networking on Zoom at these events. So thanks for your feedback. We're going to transition now to our next speaker. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Bob Coughlin, the president and CEO of MassBio. Bob's mission is to advance Massachusetts leadership in the life sciences, to grow the industry, to add value to healthcare, and to improve patients' lives. Bob is a recognized champion in life sciences because of his passion, his advocacy, and his support for the development and commercialization of breakthrough therapies and cures for people around the world who need and deserve them. So welcome to Bob.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol, and thank you everybody for having me here today. Carol, can you refresh my memory? How long am I going to give this presentation or this talk for, and then how long for Q&A?
You have a half an hour, and if we need more time, we can take it. We have until noon, so we have plenty of time.
That is perfect. Rule number one of public speaking, always know your audience and know how much time you have and be cognizant of that. So I'm going to do that. What I thought we'd do and what Carol and I talked about, and again, thank you so much for having me. And I want to start off by saying, folks, that don't for any second at all think that this is a commercial for Massachusetts, okay? Anyone who knows me knows that what I care about in this industry is helping patients, and it doesn't matter where that happens. And a goal of mine at MassBio over the years has been to work closely with organizations all over the country, all over the world, to try to do better in this area. So I'm going to give you a little background story as well, so you understand why I'm so sincere about it. Some people accuse me of being overly passionate about this industry. I'm okay with that, and I'm going to explain to you why. I also want to take some time to just talk about, and again, it's not a commercial for Massachusetts. I'm going to tell you what we've done over the last 13 or so years, just to talk about what works and what doesn't, because this is something that can be done anywhere. I also want you to know that, all of the folks in New England are our partners at MassBio. When we do economic development and try to recruit companies, we do it as a region. I work closely with Carol. I work closely with Patrice Milos, who's on the board as well, and many of you that are here today. So let's get right into the slideshow. And who's driving the slides? Is that Jordan? Are you doing that?
He can, or you can.
How can I can do?
I am doing it right now. If you
all
just
right, yeah. Could you? I'll just say next slide, please, and we'll fly right through this. All right. Thank you so much. So if we go to the next slide.
Oops, sorry. 1 second.
That's okay. And while you get into the next slide, and we'll go right to the next slide. I talk about progress is personal because for myself, going back to how I got into this industry, right? I have the best job in biotech, I think, in the world, right? I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist. What I am is I'm a recovering politician. I went to a Merchant Marine Academy. If you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. I went to a Merchant Marine Academy. Not a doctor, not a scientist, grew up in the environmental services industry. When I was 30 years old, I had my first midlife crisis. I was married to my high school sweetheart. I still am, which was a miracle in itself. Just last week was our 25th wedding anniversary. And that's her in the picture here. This comes from when I decided to leave the environmental services industry and become a full-time politician. Don't hold it against me. I've been out of politics now for over 18 years. I'm in complete recovery. Okay. Recovery is going well. But when you look back at this picture, it was when I was running for the House in Massachusetts. And, you know, that little girl that has the boys' regular haircut, she's still mad at me about that haircut. That's my daughter, Mary Kate. She's 23 years old now. She's going for her doctorate nurse practitioner. She's a biochem, molecular biology major, going to be a scientist, and I love it. And that little boy in the coveralls there is he's about 6'4" now, and he's a junior at the Massachusetts Maritime Academy where I went to college. He's a third generation of our family going there. And Mommy, right there, you might not be able to tell, but she's got a little belly going on there because she was about 22, 23 weeks pregnant with our third child. And something happened along the way here that changed how I looked at everything. And we had found out at 20 weeks that Mom was a carrier of the cystic fibrosis mutation. I went and got tested. We found out I was a carrier as well. And we found out that baby in her stomach was going to have cystic fibrosis. We were the first couple in the area to be diagnosed in utero. And as you could imagine, what that would do to any parent, I immediately seized up. I said, okay, I'm not going to run for the House of Representatives. I'm going to go back to my job and take care of my family and dig in and do what any parent would do for their child. But the more I explored it, and when I talked to people like Jim Mandel, who's the president of Boston Children's Hospital, and Dr. Bob Bell, who is the CEO of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, a lot of people and a social worker that I met with at Boston Children said to me, and I remember it like it was yesterday, said, imagine what you could do if you were a politician in Massachusetts to help hospitals, to help doctors, to help this biotech industry, which was something I didn't even know much about at the time. To create an environment so that smart people could do amazing things to help this unborn baby of yours and so many other children or sick people. And, I decided at that point in my career that I was going to try to become a lawmaker that would make Massachusetts a more friendly place for the biopharma industry, because not being a doctor or a scientist, there was nothing else I could do to help my child. And if you go to the next slide, what I did on the outside of being a member of the legislature, and please, don't tell the people in the 11th Norfolk District here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I wasn't a full-time legislator. I was spending more time working with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and we set up Cystic Fibrosis Therapeutics, Inc., which was the first venture philanthropy fund for a disease foundation. Dr. Bob Bell at the CF Foundation was a pioneer and a hero to me to this day. This is Bobby's Brigade. Bobby became the CEO of Bobby's Brigade when he was 3 months old, which was his first cystic fibrosis walk. This is when he was probably around 6 or 7 years old. And, we went out and we decided we were going to do two things. We were going to raise money, and we were going to take the Cystic Fibrosis Therapeutics, Inc. platform and invest in companies that were going to do CF research. A dear friend of mine by the name of Joe O'Donnell, who founded the Joey Fund. He's a Boston-based real estate developer, business, a very successful person. He came to me in the lobby of Boston Children's Hospital a couple of days after Bobby was born. And he said, hey, Bob, we're going to go out. Why don't we go raise $100 million and invest in companies that are going to buy a cure for your kid so he doesn't die like my Joey did. Joey passed away at the age of 12 years old. So to think that a cure had to be bought was a different mindset for me. So working as a lawmaker and working as a venture philanthropist in this space, I realized that the model was broken. Raising capital was so challenging at the time. The capital formation progress was so hard. Advancing products through clinical trials. Bobby was in 6 clinical trials before he was 6. There had to be better ways to do it. I was able to use my position in government to meet with all the FDA commissioners and become friendly with Francis Collins, who was at the NIH at the time, who identified the cystic fibrosis mutation. And the long and short of it, we really had to do things better. And in working closely with Josh Boger, who was the founder of Vertex, and Henry Tamir, who was at Genzyme at the time, and Jim Mullen was at Biogen, Mark Levin was at Millennium. These were like pioneers of the biotech industry in Massachusetts. I had the privilege of working closer with them to say, what can we do from a regulatory standpoint? What can we do from a statute standpoint? What can we do to make Massachusetts not seem like Taxachusetts anymore, right? Remember the old days when we were the world's best place in the world for the computing industry, and Route 128 Massachusetts was the information highway. Well, boom, it all went away. I went to college for engineering. I graduated, and there was no engineering jobs in the computer industry when I graduated, because we lost the whole industry out to Silicon Valley. So if you go to the next slide, I just want to put stuff in perspective for you. Kendall Square, back in the 70s and the 80s. Go back one more if you could. Nope, the other way. I want to show you that aerial photo of, so if you go back to the aerial photo and you look at Kendall Square then. You look at that picture on the left, ladies and gentlemen. That was Kendall Square in the 70s into the late 80s. You look at what was happening there. You had MIT along the river, and then you just had a barren wasteland with a federal transportation building there. And it's ironically enough, the reason we got the federal transportation building is because when this whole area was supposed to be NASA, when President Kennedy was president. President Kennedy, unfortunately, was assassinated. President Johnson said, nope, NASA's going to Texas. To the victor goes the spoils. We're going to give you a transportation building. And that's what we had as the Volpe Center. The Volpe Center right now is being transferred into 1.4 million square feet of research and development space. If you look at what we added around it, we've added about 12 million square feet of lab space. And you look to the right now, what Kendall Square looks like now. How did that happen? Okay. And I always say this to everyone, anyone who will listen. How did it happen? Right? For years, we've had 122 colleges in Massachusetts. We've had 5 of the top 6 NIH funded hospitals here. But what changed? What changed from then to now? The weather's horrible. The traffic's even worse pre-COVID, right? Why is this happening? If we go to the next slide, I'm going to explain to you what we did here in Massachusetts and what needs to happen everywhere for this to be successful. It's really forming that partnership, which I'll show you a graphic on the next slide, is a partnership between industry, academia, and government. Okay? The only way you can do a transformation of this picture to the next is if government steps up and does their part. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this right here, this is how it all started. If you look at this picture right here, that's at the Bio International Convention in 2012. Okay, the Bio International Convention was in Boston. Now, keep in mind, I went from the legislature to MassBio in 2007. Okay, so I did 3 terms in the legislature. We worked on things like the Life Science Initiative. Deval Patrick became governor. I worked in his administration for about 8 months. And that's when he and I really said, why don't we develop a strategy? And he was supportive of me leaving to go over to take over MassBio to represent industry, because he felt that if industry, academia, and government worked in a true partnership, there is not any problem you cannot solve. So this is where we really doubled down. And again, I want to talk about bipartisan politics, because the Life Science Center and Initiative started by Mitt Romney, who was a Republican. Deval Patrick came in, a Democrat, and he said, hey, we got to play our strengths. If we're going to be good at anything in Massachusetts, we need to play our strength, which is talent, high tech, biotech, clean tech, creative economy. Okay. So his mission during his 8 years as governor was to create these initiatives. We'll talk about the Life Science Initiative, but it was done in the clean energy industry. It was done with the film bill for the creative economy. We did a high tech piece as well. So the life sciences piece is what we're talking about here. We've put it into law in 2008. It was a 10-year, $1 billion initiative that will enable us to try to recruit companies from abroad, retain companies that were growing organically, and then also build up our talent, our innovation services, our tech transfer, academia, et cetera. And there's a plan in place to do that with the $1 billion. In this picture, I was saying to him, I said, Governor, do you want to know what I was saying to him? I said, Governor, if you continue to dress like me, I will not hang out with you anymore. He responded back. He said, Bob, if you keep eating the way you're eating in the private sector, that suit isn't going to fit you anymore. He was right. That suit does not fit me anymore, but I'm working on it. Let's go to the next slide, because what's happened from 2007, well, let's look. The late 90s to now, 2020, okay? Massachusetts, when I came on board at MassBio in 07, we had about 300 small to mid-sized biotech companies, and then we had Genzyme, Biogen, Millennium, Vertex was on its way. But we didn't have big pharma companies here. AZ did some stuff. Amgen did some stuff. Novartis started NIBR in Kendall Square, which was really a catalyst that got things going. But weren't the home, and we didn't have major pharma companies here. And we didn't really want them, really, right? We wanted to be biotech. We didn't want to be big pharma. But then something happened 07 into 08. The world changed, okay? Wall Street crashed. The world changed. And we were like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? I just left a cushy job in government to take over MassBio, and Wall Street and IPOs went away. The way biotech companies became pharma companies was tech transfer, founder, VC, like a Third Rock, Polaris flagship, etc. You go public, and then if you're successful, you have a drug, you commercialize it, you become a fully integrated pharma company. That's the way we did it. But when the IPO market went away, we had 300 companies that were going to die on the vine. So we did a study. It was called back then the MassBio 2015 report. It was a 5-year strategic plan that was to get us from 09, 10 all the way to 2015. And in that plan, it said, you got to go out and recruit big pharma companies to come here. The IPO market's going to go away. Only way you're going to grow is if big pharma will agree to do BD deals. So we did a road show. We went on the road and we convinced John Lechleiter at Lilly, Jeff Kindler was at Pfizer, Chris Viehbacher wasn't even at Sanofi yet. He was at GSK. We did the road show and we said, we're trying to convince these big pharma CEOs that the idea of them getting around the patent cliff that they were facing, because they had a problem. They were facing patent cliffs, and high throughput screening campuses weren't going to outpace the patent cliff that they were facing, so they were in trouble. The biotech hippies in Boston were in trouble. Even though they didn't want to do business with the big suits in big pharma, they were all going to die on the vine because they weren't going to have an IPO. So we used this horrible time, this challenge, as an opportunity, did the roadshow, and convinced big pharma companies that external innovation was a way of the future. And if you're going to do that, Massachusetts is a good place because we have, all these world-class academic medical centers, academic institutions, and a critical mass of a bunch of companies that are going to die on the vine if they don't partner with big pharma companies. So we did that, and it worked. And I remember John Lechleiter saying to me, we'll come out there and we'll do licensing deals and maybe some acquisitions, but Lilly will never have bricks and mortar in Massachusetts. Most of them said that. Today, ladies and gentlemen, 18 of the top 20 have a strong physical presence here in Massachusetts, and we're actively pursuing the other two. So let's go to the next slide so you can see how this actually happened, because numbers don't lie, right? We track what's going on. It's been 94% growth over the last 15 years in employment, okay? Over 16.5 million square feet of commercial lab space has been built in the last decade, an increase of 91%. It's all filled, okay? How did we recruit big pharma to come here? We led with talent. We said we have the people. We have the bench of entrepreneurs. We have the bench of seasoned veterans that are coming out of these other companies as the industry rolls up. So it was a good story to tell, and we continue to tell it. Let's go to the next slide. And I just want to talk about pipeline, right? Because it comes down to the science, right? And when we talk about other parts of the country and other parts of New England and other parts of the world, what does it take to create a strong biotech cluster? Well, you need science, right? Academia, whether it's producing talent or ideas, a nice, tech transfer operation. That's like people say to me a lot of times, are you a lobbyist for the pharma industry or the biotech industry or the hospitals and colleges? You spend more time fighting for hospitals, colleges, and universities. I said, yeah, because that's what it's all about. If you don't have the hospitals that you have in Rhode Island, if you don't have places like Brown, like you have in Rhode Island, you don't have, in a supportive government, you don't have the ingredients that it takes. You have all that. You have all of that. You have everything that we have in Massachusetts, right? I'm sick and tired. People say, oh, you're Massachusetts. Well, we sucked at this industry just 15 years ago. What changed, right? It doesn't happen by accident. You need academia, industry, and government on the same page. And nobody can say that your governor is not committed to the life sciences industry. Okay, so let me get back. I go off script. I apologize. I have ADHD really bad. I'm going to get back to the therapeutic pipeline. You'd think Massachusetts was a real insane, hyper-focused on rare genetic disorders because of the Vertexes of the world and the Genzymes of the world. Not true. We're a cancer town. And cancer is many different diseases. We all know that. But we definitely want to track all of the indications that we're working on here in Massachusetts. We also track the amount of products, and I don't have the slide here, and you can download all these slides off of massbio.org. Just do our industry stat, by the numbers report. We have all these things, but what we really try to track a lot of is research projects, what's in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trials, and then drugs, right? It's like a hockey game, shots on goal. You need lots of shots on net if you're going to get goals. So we track all of that. Let's go to the next slide, and I want to talk about sprawl, because when you look at what's happening, right? I don't do any recruiting or economic development in Cambridge or Boston. Kendall Square's filled. We're adding another 1.4 million in the Volpe building, like I told you. That's going to get filled as well. That's research development. A lot of these people like to be in that area because of the R&D piece, but you don't have to be. I mean, the folks at the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce and the Kendall Square Association, they get hives when I give this speech because I spend more time trying to put people northeast, north, south, out west. I went to a ribbon cutting out in Worcester yesterday, and I'm going to be out there again tomorrow. Obviously, it was COVID-19 friendly and a lot of virtual, but we're sprawling across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We utilize money from the Life Science Initiative to build the Institute for the Advancement of Life Sciences out at UMass and Amherst. Bay State Health out in Springfield is doing clinical trials now and competing for NIH funding. We built the Berkshire Innovation Center, so there's an incubator out there in Western Mass. We're creating a cluster in Western Mass the same way Worcester started 10 years ago, the same way Kendall Square started 25, 30 years ago. So it's really something that you can do anywhere. Carol will tell you, companies like Rubius and Amgen that have expanded manufacturing down in Rhode Island, that was the best decision for those companies. Again, I don't work for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We get paid by industry. There are zero public dollars from Massachusetts that come into MassBio. We work for the industry. So when we work with our member companies, we want to find the best solution for them at the best price. When you move to Rhode Island and Connecticut and southern New Hampshire and eastern New York and western Massachusetts and different parts of the Commonwealth here in Massachusetts, that's a cost-effective way. What do we see as the future? We see a ton of biomanufacturing coming into play. We see cell and gene therapy, viral vector manufacturing. I'm going to tell you, we're recruiting a company right now that's in a competitive situation. It's called Project Dragonfly. It was the first search requirement that I've seen in the last 13 plus years that I've been here at MassBio where they wanted 100 plus acres. And guess what? They're not building drug. They're not manufacturing final product. It's the first time that a company's come in that wants to manufacture drug substance, ingredients, and API. We've never thought we'd be able to compete at that level, but we can now because of COVID-19. When you look at what COVID-19 has done, and I'll get more to it in a second, but people realize supply chain was broken. So in our region now, out in the West Coast and the East Coast, let's double down, Carol, and let's continue to fight for manufacturing opportunities that we never thought we would be competing for in the past, okay? Let's go to the next slide, and I want to show how, just personal this is. I throw this in there because I just want to say that was on January 1st, last year, not 2019, but was it 2019? I can't even tell. The years are all running together now. But that was January 1st of last year where it was on the front page of the Boston Globe. And I was sick and tired of trying to defend how drugs are too expensive and whatnot. My kid was CF, and that picture, he was 17 years old there. He didn't have much time to go. He was losing his lung function at around 5% a year. He's got end-stage liver disease, needs a liver transplant, and none of the Vertex drugs to date had worked for his combination of mutations. But Vertex never gave up. The CF Foundation never gave up. And this was how we try to personalize the story in Massachusetts. If politicians in Massachusetts don't support our industry, we make sure that everybody who has CF, Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, visit those politicians and let them know that they will never be voting for them again if they don't support the industry that not only drives the economy here in Massachusetts, but also will save their lives. Everybody is a patient at some point. So let's continue to make that narrative personal and share it with everyone and let them know that we'll vote them out of office if they don't support us. Let's go to COVID-19, and I'll come back to the personal piece as I close up. The next slide talks about what's going on in COVID-19 in the region. Let's go to the next slide. Over 90 companies right now are working on COVID-19 related research as it's related to diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. We're fighting as a region way outside of our weight. Let's go to the next slide. That's an opinion piece that we did talking about how, folks, you got to understand, I don't think any of us thought that we'd be on this call today talking about how the most important thing to our world's economy is a vaccine. The most important thing to people feeling safe again is testing, therapeutics, or vaccines, right? I mean, we've been trying to explain the amazing stuff that our industry does for patients, and people just never would listen until they had cancer, or they had a kid with CF, or they had ALS, right? Then everyone listens. Now we have an opportunity, and I don't want anyone to think we're being opportunistic because the pandemic is horrible. Many lives lost, many lives affected, horrible, horrible, horrible. But the only way we're going to get out of it is science. Our industry is going to solve this problem. Let's make sure everybody knows it. Let's make sure we don't screw it up and price it wrong, or make sure that, we've got to do this right. And that's a whole other discussion and panel we can have. But I'm so proud of what this industry is doing. I just got off an event that we did with several members of Congress, and we were talking about how this is an opportunity for us to change the image of our industry with elected officials. So we want to keep that front and center. And let's go to the next slide. And I want to save a little time for Q&A. This is why I do what I do. And I'm going to get emotional right now because I swear to God, I'm going through my last probably midlife crisis, right? I've had 3 of them, and I get real emotional now that I'm an older man instead of a young man. And a year ago yesterday, we found out that Trikafta was approved by the FDA. Bobby started taking Trikafta on November 8th of last year. I told you what the trajectory of his disease was, and it wasn't good. He probably had a couple years to go. Since he's been on that drug, he's gained 25 pounds, he's grown 5 inches, and instead of his lung function declining by 5%, it's increased by 15%. Do you know what that means in years of life? A lot. It gives us time. Gives us time to focus on gene therapy and perhaps a cure, time that he didn't have. I don't have nightmares about going to his funeral anymore because of a drug that took 18 years and $13 billion to invent. Okay? That's a lot of money. But you also got to understand that you want to know how many times he's been in the hospital since he started taking that drug? I'm going to knock on wood. 0. This is when we get into the part of our system where we're going to start talking about turning our sick care system into a healthcare system because our healthcare system's broken. We don't have a payer system that's designed to absorb cures for hepatitis C or drugs that change the course of disease and in some cases cure disease. And that's something that we as policymakers need to continue, or policy influencers need to work with policymakers to ensure that we have a system that catches up with the rate that we have innovated here in Massachusetts. So that's some of the stuff that we're working on. This guy is alive today because of this industry, and we all know and love somebody who's experiencing an unmet medical need that needs something like this, and we all know and love somebody who has lost the battle to an unmet medical need. So this is personal, folks. So I ask you to join me in keeping it personal, and it's all of our responsibility to make sure that whether it's Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Texas, California, or Singapore, that we do our best to make it better for this industry so that we can solve unmet medical need, drive the economy, and help humankind. So I can't thank you enough for your attention. Thank you for having me here today. Carol, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for what all the amazing people in Rhode Island do for patients, because I can't think of a more noble profession than working in the life sciences industry because you're the smartest people in the world. You could go do anything, and you've chosen to work in an industry that's keeping people like my son and so many people alive. You're improving the quality of lives of sick people, and don't ever, ever, ever let the baloney, stupid rhetoric about people saying drugs are too expensive when they don't understand it. We know there's bad actors out there that do stupid things as it relates to taking old generic drugs and upping the pricing. We can fix that. But these new breakthrough innovative therapies, let's be proud of what we do, and let's fix the system so it truly rewards value and in wellness and good health. I could go on forever, so I'm going to break for questions there. I hope I didn't go too long. It looks like we're still on time here. So
You're
happy to
perfect.
answer any questions, Carol.
Perfect, Bob. Bob, that is an amazing story and very inspiring and really impactful. And every time you give us an update about your son, it's just such a overwhelming, emotional, positive story. So thank you for sharing that with us. Do we have any questions from anyone to Bob? Anyone in our group? Bob, I don't see any questions, but one thing I think is very interesting that you mentioned earlier on is the way that you are now developing small clusters within Massachusetts and spreading the life sciences technology out to other parts of the state. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's if you look at history and how the cluster began, I mean, keep in mind, MassBio was founded in 1985. There were 6 companies: Biogen, Integrated Genetics, Genetics Institute, Genzyme, Damon, and Biotechnica. Those were the 6 companies. The only one that's still around standalone today is Biogen. Genzyme's part of Sanofi. But when they formed MassBio, they did it for 2 reasons: to hire a lobbyist to explain to people what the definition of genetic engineering was, and to do a group purchasing consortium. We still run that group purchasing consortium today. It's very big, very successful. It enables us to give small companies the same pricing that large companies could get on their own. Obviously, we have a very large governmental affairs effort, but we do so much more now at MassBio. Their stretch goal was to have about 30 member companies. Today, we have 1,400 member companies at MassBio. So we watched how Kendall Square grew. Then we saw something that started, about 15 years ago out in Worcester. You have the medical school in Worcester. BASF went out there, that became Abbott, that became AbbVie, right? So you had a big an anchor. Then we created MBI, the incubators out there. And now on its own, Worcester, Marlborough, Northborough, Westborough, on its own, that region is a top 10 biotech cluster in the country on its own. So we saw that this can be replicated. If you have, talent, tech transfer, hospital, university, incubator, good climate, the towns and cities need to be supportive of the industry, it takes off. Worcester's amazing. So then we said, why aren't we revitalizing Springfield out in Western Massachusetts? It's really how the old economy meets the new economy, right? We had Smith & Wesson, you manufacture paper out there. You have military contractors, right? We have a great workforce. You have UMass, you have Bay State. What do we need? So you look at what ingredients need to be brought out there to pull that recipe together. Then you love it and nurture it and you watch it take off. But it doesn't happen overnight. So now, as people are moving from R&D to M, like the manufacturing piece is taking off. We're working right now on six huge biomanufacturing site selections. And between us, don't repeat this, I think we're going to win 2 or 3. I don't know how we're going to fill the jobs moving forward. Workforce development is a huge issue for us because people are coming here not because it's cheaper. They're coming here because they want that sustainable workforce in the region. Why does Rubius and Amgen like where they've gone in Rhode Island? You draw the circles. You have an amazing workforce in Rhode Island and on the south coast of Massachusetts. They'd rather drive that way than into traffic. And just because COVID has gotten rid of the traffic problem for a while, it's not gone forever. It's going to come back, hopefully not the way it was, but we've got to fix a lot of those issues. So these clusters, these that are popping up all over, it can be done anywhere, and we need to do it.
Well, I think it's important too that, as neighbors, it affects us because we can be even closer to those clusters as well as the Cambridge area. So lots of good potential for collaboration there.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know this, Carol, when we compete as a region, it's all in New England. If we're going to compete against the West Coast and Texas, and again, I'm fine when companies go to Texas and the West Coast or even further down on the Southeast Coast. I'm fine with that as long as everybody is doing better, right? You know, I'm a Navy guy. All boats rise with the tide. I don't care if a CF drug came from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Texas, California, or Asia, Germany, anywhere, right? So we all need to do better. This isn't competition. This is everybody working together to do better. If Governor Baker, who took, you know, what Governor Patrick did and tries to make it better, and that forces Governor Raimondi to do something that gives Rhode Island a competitive edge, that's all good. That's all good. We work for patients. We work for the industry that helps patients, and we all need to work together. And you know, hey, you know me. I make it perfectly clear to everybody in Massachusetts, I don't work for Massachusetts. I work for the industry, and we want our member companies to go to the best place for them to have the best chance of succeeding in an industry where failure is so high. Right? This is tough stuff. Tough stuff. So I love working with you on that stuff.
Sure, Bob. You know, we have a lot of young people on our webinar this morning, and with the digitization of everything in the world, what advice would you give people? You mentioned your career path. What advice would you give people about careers they could pursue in the life sciences?
Yeah, I didn't choose this career path. A life event caused me to do it. And I'm grateful for that, because look at the final story, the final chapter to the story might be okay. I never thought it would be. I didn't think my kid would live this long, right? So I didn't want to have any regrets. But now it's amazing to see how this story can turn out. But for anyone, like my friends who are lawyers, accountants, HR professionals, marketing professionals, I'm like a preacher for this industry, because we need everybody in this industry. Well, think about it. You could go work at NASA. You could go work at, you know, a defense contractor. You could, God forbid, you could even go work in financial services, right? Make a lot of money. But think about what this industry does for sick people. So to all of these young software engineers, techies, right? We educate a ton of them in this region, right? And a lot of these techies think, oh, I got to go work in the gaming industry. I got to go work in social media. I'm heading out west. We preach to them and we say, do you want, I mean, you're really smart. You're a software engineer. Digital health is the way of the future. AI is the way of the future in this industry. Do you want to go out west and work for a social media company where you cause blindness? Or do you want to stay here and work for our companies where you cure blindness? So we're trying to change the image of the industry. I mean, I was out at Astellas yesterday where they opened the Astellas Institute for Regenerative Medicine. It's going to be their North America head for regenerative medicine. And it was in a facility that used to be the Bose engineering place. So I'm like, think about it. It was a place that used to figure out new ways to create amazing noise and music and whatnot for, you know, sound. And now it's being refit to actually cure Stargardts and macular degeneration, to cure eyesight, you know, loss, to bring eyesight to people, vision, right? So, I mean, we need to, as an industry, do a better job letting these young people know that this is the coolest industry in the world, that you can make a good living, make good money, be treated well in a very compassionate environment, in workforce environment that companies create, and solve unmet medical need and help sick people. There's nothing better. And we also got to do a better job of creating that on-ramp. Like we created Project On-Ramp here in Massachusetts to really educate and create summer internship programs for first-generation college students and kids from underserved communities, because they don't know about life sciences because their parents and grandparents and neighbors don't work in the industry. How do we diversify? We're so committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it's not just because it's the right thing to do. It's a good business decision. We need the workforce, and they live here. Let's create that on-ramp and crush it.
Sorry, everybody. I think we lost Bob. Did we?
No, I'm here.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. We lost me then.
Yeah, we lost you, Carol. We were talking away over here. Now, hey, folks, I haven't had a chance to go through all the chat and stuff, but if you have any questions, you can find me right on. It's robert.coughlin@massbio.org. I'm doing the best I can trying to keep up with email, but this has been a real crazy time for us, as you can imagine. A big role of what I personally play here in Massachusetts is the in-between for industry and the administration. And I have been working directly with the governor's office and Secretary Sudders, who's the command staff or heading up the command to the response to the pandemic. So unfortunately, I've been spending a lot of time with the Massachusetts government again. I thought I was getting out of that, but obviously we've got three companies that are high profile that are involved with vaccine manufacturing. Two of them are going to be manufactured right here in Massachusetts. It's already underway, so it's been kind of a crazy time for me personally here. But I love this industry. I love what we do, and if there's any way I can be helpful, please reach out.
Thank you, Bob. We're going to have you back as we get closer to the vaccine. I think that would be really interesting to hear more about that. But as we close, I want to ask you something. We asked all our panelists what they do in their downtime you're a very high energy person. So what do you do in your downtime? We had a musician, we have a motocross person, a helicopter pilot. What's your downtime activity that you can share with us?
I mean, there's only one, and it's boating and fishing. And it's been a godsend this year because my son Bobby, as you can imagine, he can't get the regular flu, never mind COVID, right? So flu season has always been challenging for us. But now with COVID, he's been locked down pretty tight since February. He obviously didn't finish up at high school. He finished online. He's going to college now, 100% online. And he calls his room at our house his cave and his prison cell sometimes when he gets down. So what we tried to do is I have a boat that I live on during the summer in Boston. It's my cottage that's close to work, I call it. And then I have a fishing boat, a smaller boat that we got it all set up for striped bass, false albacore, bonita, bluefish, and I just love fishing. I catch and release. It's just being out on the salt water is something that's good for him. It's healthy for the mind. It's healthy for his lungs. So many days we were out fishing from 4 o'clock till 7 o'clock in the morning, so he could get out in a very safe environment. And it's been a godsend, because if we didn't have that, I don't know what he would do to keep his mental health set up. So I look at it as a blessing too, because if the worst thing that happened from COVID, I got to spend a ton of time with my 18-year-old son that typically don't want to hang out with their dads. It's a good thing.
Sure. Well, thank you, Bob. That's very important to stay healthy, and we're all figuring out ways to stay healthy and really stay close to our families during this time. So thank you again. We will have you back when we learn more about the vaccines and how they're doing. We appreciate your time. So I want to thank everyone for being on our webinar this morning. Please keep an eye out for our Rhode Island Innovator Series, which is going to follow this, and it will follow with a focus on Alcinous and then Bolden, and then we're going to focus on the vaccines later on after the first of the year and where they stand. So we'll be holding more events for you on behalf of Rhode Island Bio and Bio, Driven and Rhode Island INBRE, and the Venture Cafe. Thank you, everybody. Please continue to stay safe and be well, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye,
Carol.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.